Now turning focus to our top story this week, multi-club ownership groups in football. Now, football is undergoing a major transformation as a multi-club ownership or MCO reshapes the sports landscape. No longer are teams isolated, they now function as interconnected parts of a larger footballing empire with shared resources, strategies and even players. Take Manchester City, Girona and Bahia for example. Under the same ownership, these clubs operate like one cohesive unit. Red Bull's network connects Salzburg, Leipzig and New York Red Bulls, all working together to develop talent, grow brands and make global deals. This is the power of MCO, creating a footballing powerhouse across multiple continents. But how does it actually work? In an MCO setup, multiple clubs are owned by the same entity or individual. The goal is shared resources, strategic development and financial synergies. For example, Red Bull's development system has seen players like Upamecano and move from Salzburg to Leipzig and eventually to Bayern Munich for €42.5 million. What began as a small investment in Austria has grown into a global success. One of the major advantages of MCO is the ability to create talent pipelines. By acquiring smaller clubs in peripheral leagues, owners can scout and develop players in a structured system, providing a steady flow of talent. Another key benefit is the commercial power MCOs wield. Global sponsorship deals like the $860 million Puma agreement with City Football Group apply across multiple clubs in the portfolio, increasing the negotiating power and brand reach. Moreover, data-driven decision-making plays a huge role. Clubs within an MCO share valuable data, scouting networks and analytical tools, helping them perform better and establish a unified team identity. Red Bull clubs, for instance, all follow a high-press, aggressive playing style aided by shared sports science methodologies. The rise of MCO has been staggering. In 2012, only 8 groups existed. By 2023, that number has skyrocketed to over 120, with more than 300 clubs now under MCOs. Investors see these clubs as valuable assets, increasing club valuations, expanding brand reach, and generating revenue from media rights, sponsorships, and player trades. However, MCO is not without its risks and ethical concerns. These have led to protests in several countries, with fans voicing their discontent. In England, for example, Manchester City's ownership group, City Football Group, has faced criticism from supporters who feel that their club is becoming just another piece in a larger corporate empire, sidelining local fan interests. Similarly, in France, the influence of the City Football Group over clubs like Troyes has sparked concerns about the competitive integrity of French football. Fans argue the MCO could create a feeder club mentality where small clubs merely exist to serve the interests of the bigger teams in the network. In Germany, where fan ownership models are more prominent, there has been significant pushback against MCOs. Clubs like RB Leipzig, owned by Red Bull, have faced fierce protests due to the perceived threat of traditional fan-driven models and the fear that football is being commercialized beyond recognition. Critics argue that MCOs threaten the very essence of what football should be about: competition, community, and the authenticity of the sport. These protests highlight the growing divide between traditional football fans and the corporate-driven approach of the MCOs. As the model expands, questions about competitive integrity, fan loyalty, and ethical concerns continue to grow louder. The landscape of football is changing and MCO is leading the way, but as we've seen, the debate over its impact on the game's heart and soul is far from over. Stay tuned for more updates as this exciting evolution unfolds. I now invite Kiran Maguire, lecturer of football finance at the University of Liverpool, into this discussion. Thanks, Kiran, for joining me in this discussion. It's a pleasure to have you on NewsX World.
Thank you for the invite. It should be fun.
Sure. So how do you see the multi-club ownership groups effectively manage and integrate multiple clubs across different leagues, and what are the key operational strategies used to align these clubs under a single vision?
As far as the investors are concerned, it allows them to de-risk their investment in football. If you don't qualify for a European competition such as the Champions League, there's serious financial repercussions. If you have two or three clubs within your MCO that are all trying to achieve the heights, then that's likely to reduce the risk of any one of them having a bad season, that having a detrimental financial impact. You mentioned synergies in your introduction, and there's both revenue synergies and cost synergies to be achieved. You can go to sponsors and offer them a global product. You can have just one HR department, one IT department across the whole of the MCO, and this is a way of spreading costs and also allocating profits to perhaps those clubs who are under potential constraints due to cost control rules operating in their domestic environment.
All right, Shakiran, in your opinion, what specific economic, technological, and strategic factors have driven the exponential growth of these multi-club ownership in recent years? And how has the business model evolved from a niche concept to a dominant trend in global football?
Well, I think I'm based in the UK, as you'll be aware. As a result of Brexit, it meant that clubs couldn't recruit players from Europe and beyond ages 16 and 17. So therefore, quite a few Premier League clubs, they bought clubs in Europe. That allowed them to stockpile talent in the European part of the MCO until they reached the age of 18, and then they could come to the Premier League. So that's one environment. That's one example. Also, if you've got a player who you think might be at the standard in 2 or 3 years' time to play at the elite level, whether that's in La Liga or Bundesliga or Premier League. If you have an MCO, what you can do is that you can bring that player to one of the satellite clubs, and there's normally a controlling club or a head club in any MCO, and that would allow the player to develop on an individual basis, but they'd be given the same diet, they'd be given the same technical and tactical skills and policies which are being employed by the group as a whole. So therefore, when that player they feel is fit to move to the senior club, they have less to learn. So it can be used as a stepping stone as far as player development is concerned, and that's beneficial as far as the overall group is concerned. That player's value increases, and therefore potentially you've got a higher sale price.
Let's then talk about the ethical dilemmas. What are the main dilemmas and competitive integrity issues that are raised by MCO, and particularly in scenarios where multiple clubs owned by the same entity compete against one another in major tournaments like the UEFA Champions League, and how should these concerns be addressed?
Well, if we take a look at what's happened under UEFA, you're not allowed to have two or more clubs which have the same senior ownership. So therefore what you have to do is you normally put one of those clubs into a blind trust, which means that the parent club has no influence over the tactical, the technical, the decisions in terms of which players and which tactics are employed for individual matches, because what you don't want is a repeat of some things that we have seen in European football historically, whereby you might have two clubs potentially with an MCO where one club needs to win the last match 2-0 to qualify for the next round, and they very conveniently win to that effect. So the governing authorities are taking steps to try to prove independence. There's an awful lot of money coming into football from a huge number of different stakeholders, and one of the attractions of football is the idea of jeopardy, is the idea of uncertainty, and you need integrity for that. So therefore, as far as the MCO is concerned, it's got to be seen to be wholly independent of the club that it's facing on an individual 90 minutes match.
Sure. Kiran, before I let you go, another question. How are protests against multi-club ownership in England, France and Germany specifically challenging the legitimacy of the model, particularly in relation to accusations of undermining local fan culture? and distorting competitive integrity and also prioritizing corporate interests over traditional football values.
Well, certainly investors and what you might call legacy fans are key stakeholders within football all over the world. We often say that football's the most important of the unimportant things in life, and apart from your family, for many football fans, that's how they identify themselves. That's the most important thing that they focus on a week-to-week basis. So therefore, it is important that the club that you go to see is seen as being part of the local history, culture, independence, and heritage of that individual town or city. And there's a danger of that being diluted if you are just seen as being part of a much vaster conglomerate. Manchester City, or rather the City Football Group, did try to acquire a club in the Netherlands, for example, called NAC Breda, and they had to pull out of that. Such was the extent of the opposition. We're seeing issues between Chelsea and Strasbourg, where the Strasbourg fans feel that they are the poor relations of the Chelsea group, and that's caused some issues as well. So I think the MCOs have to be very careful that they do not disrupt those integral parts of history and heritage and culture that exist within individual clubs, because they risk alienating the fans. Or, as you rightly pointed out, there have been protests, and football fans can make those protests quite vocal and quite visual as well.
Sure. Thanks then, Professor Kiran Maguire, for joining me in this discussion at NewsX's World of Sports. And now moving ahead, viewers,